Hey YouTube, what's up? Okay, so this video is going to be a little walkthrough on how to install crDroid Android 11 on your Nexus 7 2013 edition. I'm making the video because there really was no guide as far as I could see as to how you actually go about doing this installation. So yeah, I thought I'd fill that little gap. Needless to say, it took me a wee while to get there myself, but the actual process is not too bad once you know that it works. Alright, what I'm going to start with is just doing a little showcase of crDroid 11 itself, just so you can see that it is actually working. And then I'll move on to just kind of a step-by-step tutorial where I'll just kind of walk through all the major things, and then finally I'll end it by providing a bit more context and explanation as to how I arrived at the particular methodology I did, because it was a bit of an adventure, and there were a few learnings I picked up from that. I mean, it is one thing to just follow a tutorial by rote without really knowing what you're doing, but I think it's a whole lot more interesting to actually gain a little bit more insight as to the why you're doing what you do, and I've got a little bit of that to add. Now, with all that being said, I am by no means an expert, and I don't necessarily think this is the only way or even the best way, but I know it works, and so that's the way I'm going to demonstrate. It's also entirely possible that I may miss some relevant or important point as I go through this little tutorial, and if I realize that after the fact, what I'll do is I'll just add some details in the description, just pointing out anything I may have missed. And in addition to that, I will include all and any links that I think are relevant to actually getting this process done. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's just jump in and we'll do a quick little demo. I just want to mention that I am visually impaired, so you may have to make some allowances if I fumble around a bit. Alright. So what we've got here is I'm just casting my Nexus 7 to the computer so you guys can actually see what's happening. I'm going to just quickly jump into the settings menu of actually the home screen, just so we can have a quick look at that. And to be honest, that's for no real reason other than if we actually go from this top level menu to the home screen menu, we'll see there's a few options here, which is nice. We can straight away realize that this is quite a complete version or implementation of Android 11, so as far as I can tell there's very little missing, which is pretty awesome. So in particular, this is a very, I guess, obvious or basic feature, but it is again often missing from many custom ROMs, but it's here, and that is the option to basically be able to lock down your desktop. And in this one here, it's a toggle on option, so you allow edit, toggle it on, so you can change your desktop, and then toggle it off to lock your desktop down, which is the current state I have it in because I am inclined to be a bit of a klutz and I can kind of move things around without intending to. Alright, so we'll just move on from that, and we'll just jump straight into the main settings menu. Again, this is just a very quick overview of what this particular ROM has to offer. We'll just randomly have a look at a few of these options. So we'll jump into network. One thing you'll notice is all the submenus have their own cute little animations, which again just goes to the completeness of this ROM. It's certainly aesthetically pleasing, and I should also mention it actually performs very well also, with the caveat that you need to actually, once you've first booted up, you need to let it sit for a couple of minutes, or at least I do, and I think that's primarily because I've got so many notifications coming through when I first fire it up. So, but with that caveat aside, it actually runs really great. So yeah, there's nothing much to see in this menu, so we'll move on. Let's have a look at battery. Again, a cute little animation showing you how much charge you've got left. And so you've got a number of sort of the more modern battery management tools available at your disposal. Yeah, let's have a quick look at display. So in display, most relevant to me is the dark theme, which is not really a preference so much as a necessity. Again, because of my visual impairment, I find it almost impossible to read anything on a white background. So when they introduced dark theme as a system-wide feature, that was pretty damn awesome. In fact, I had not used Android in any shape or form for many years, and it was only fairly recently that I decided to dust off a whole lot of unused Android devices that I kind of came to discover the joy of custom ROMs. So I've been on quite a big learning curve over the last month. Again, not that I'm an expert. Alright, so we'll just back out of here. Let's keep it moving. Again, I'm not going to walk through most of this. We'll just have a quick peek, have a look at security. So in security, you'll notice you've actually got face lock, so you can actually try that feature out. And I did give it a go, and it actually worked really well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's jump into the crDroid specific settings, because I guess that's where you get arguably a lot of added value specific to this ROM. Again, there is a lot of stuff here. Just jump across the other tabs. Again, I mean, this is tweaker's paradise, and the vast majority of this stuff I've not looked at or even necessarily know what a lot of it does, but there's plenty of exploration available downstream. Okay, back out of that, and we'll just head for about tablet. So we can see it is a Nexus 7 device with Android version 11, and in fact, let's jump in. We can see the crDroid logo telling us again Android 11, and in fact if we just jump in, have a look at the Easter egg, why not? And this colour is not the best for me. Voila, Android 11. Okay, let's get on to the walkthrough. Just to the side. So what I've done to aid myself to hopefully not forget too much is I've just made a little notepad that kind of lists off the bullet points that I think are relevant to the discussion. Now I'm not going to go in depth as in like this is some sort of beginner's guide. I'm going to assume that you kind of understand what fast boot is, what ADB is, Android debug bridge, and you kind of know how to set that stuff up. If you don't know how to do those things, this might not be the video you want to start with. So for example, in this first step here I've listed we're going to unlock the bootloader, and again that's just a fast boot command, so we're going to fast boot OEM unlock, but if this sounds like you need a bit more in-depth guide, then simply Google that and you'll find videos that can teach you how to do that kind of stuff in detail. It's not hard, assuming you've installed the right software into your PC, or I guess Mac for that matter. Now let's just, before I go any further, let's just quickly talk about the Nexus 7 2013. It actually comes in two flavors. There's a version codenamed Flow, which is your Wi-Fi edition, and then there's also a version called Deb, which additionally has cellular network connectivity, and that's actually the version I have. That's a little bit relevant to be aware of, because when you download your TWRP recovery, you want to pick the right version for your device, and so that's either going to be Flow or Deb, depending on exactly which unit you've got. Which actually brings us to point 2. So we want to, having unlocked our bootloader, we now want to flash TWRP recovery to our device. And to do that, again, is just another fastboot command. This time fastboot flash recovery, and then just the name of the image file that you're flashing into the device. So again, you'll be able to figure that out by just the image file that you actually download from the TWRP official website. Pretty straightforward. Alright, point 3. Now this is where things are going to get interesting, and I'm going to slow it down and talk about this in a little bit more detail. So step 3 here, we're installing the clamor repartition script. And we're going to do it via TWRP. So again, we want to just pump the brakes a little bit here, and I'm going to bring up a website to sort of aid with the discussion. So what I have here is actually an XDA thread, and it's fairly old, that actually discusses how to repartition your Nexus 7 2013 edition. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, primarily because the system partition is a tiny little 880 megabytes in size, which is scarcely big enough to hold a ROM, and when you want to try and squeeze in a GApps package on top of that into that little system partition, it's just not going to happen. It's a surprising oversight actually from Google to have set it up that way originally. You would have thought they would have been a little more forward thinking, especially since the device itself has a decent amount of capacity on board, although I admit it has no SD card, which is a bit of a shame. But I digress. This website here just basically tells you how to actually increase your partition size by aid of a repartition script that a very clever person developed back in the day. Now, I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is I actually assumed that this was an older version of the repartition script that is also documented in this in this web page here, which is how to install LineageOS 18.1, which is also Android 11, onto your Nexus 7 device, because it also obviously requires a repartition. Now, I just cut to the chase here and tell you that these are both the same script. Now, that may not have been the case when this was originally documented, and perhaps then the script was an earlier version of the one that is now available in the download link. But I can tell you that I have actually run both these scripts, and they both give you exactly the same amount of space back, which is about 1500 megabytes or just under. So that's kind of important to point out. The other thing I want to point out is, again, if we look at the Lineage guide to installation, they use the LineageOS recovery in order to execute the script. However, you don't need to, and in fact the script was originally designed to be run from within TWRP, and you can quite clearly and unambiguously see that through the actual instructions that it generates after it is first run, which it tells you to go to advanced/terminal and then to enter the word modify. So clearly it was originally intended for TWRP, and indeed that's the way I did it. So we're just going to jump back here. So this was what I found in terms of doing this, and here we actually see a very tight little set of concise instructions here to actually go through the repartitioning process via TWRP. And this web page also has links to the repartition zip file that you want to run. So just to very quickly talk us through it, what we're going to do is we're just going to boot into TWRP recovery. I just simply copied the repartition script to my internal storage using the MTP USB file transfer capability. So I just copied it from my PC to the device via USB, and then once it was in, I just went to the install option and selected the zip file, and it ran it. It then told me that I needed to go to advanced terminal and to just enter the word modify, which I did, and it then went and actually appeared to do the repartitioning process, which is a little bit scary. You can just see it doing all sorts of stuff, but it seemed to go absolutely fine. And once that completes, what you want to do is you want to reboot straight back into TWRP recovery. Now this is where I diverge slightly from the instructions that you'll find here, which are actually telling you to install and reboot into a special custom version of TWRP recovery. And the reason is pretty solid why they're telling you to do that, because this new version actually has been modified to be able to see the new partition setup, which includes a new vendor partition. However, I actually had problems with this modified version of TWRP. In a nutshell, it doesn't appear to work very well. I created a full backup, which I then tried to restore, and when I tried to run from that restore, I went into a boot loop, which is not a good sign. In addition, I noticed when I ran the backup, the progress bar didn't increase at all, which was kind of making me wonder whether it was actually even doing anything. So the bottom line is I actually don't trust this modified version of TWRP, so instead I just stuck with the official latest version, which for me was the deb version. And there is a caveat I have to mention with that. If you are going to stick with that, as I did, then when you do your backups, you have to limit what you back up to both the boot and the data partitions. Don't back up or try to restore the system partition. If you do that and try to then run, you will also get problems. But the fact of the matter is, it is the boot and the data partitions that are the things you really are most interested in backing up. The boot image is actually important because that is effectively where the kernel resides. So for example, if you do at some point do a systemless root, such as installing Magisk, it will update your boot partition and reflash it, so it customizes it. So you want to, and if you then many versions of custom ROMs by default will also update the boot record as well, and so if you subsequently update the ROM you've got installed with just a slightly later version, you're doing a dirty install, just for argument's sake. It will also update the boot partition, which means you will actually lose your root. And so sure, you can then go ahead and rerun the magisk, or you can actually just restore that boot, assuming it's just a minor revision to a ROM you've already installed. But anyway, I digress. So with that warning aside, that's what I did. This process is sticking with the latest version of TWRP. Okay, so let's just jump back to our little list of bullet points. So we've now successfully repartitioned our device, and although I bleated on about it for some amount of time, it's really not that big of a deal. Once you've actually done it, guys, you do want to reboot back into it, and you want to do a full reformat. So you're actually going to do a hard reformat, which will wipe out your internal storage at this point. So you're going to lose everything that's currently on there. Once you've done that reformat, you then want to do an advanced wipe, and just go ahead and tick off everything. It's safer than sorry, and then just give it swipe to wipe. And you may notice that you'll get a few mount errors. Apparently, as per the guide, it's not actually an issue. Just go ahead and do it anyway. Once you've done that, again, just reboot back into TWRP recovery. Now, one thing you can do is when you're in twrp, you can actually select advanced wipe, and instead of wiping anything, you can select the modify repair partition button. And from there, you can then select system, and you can go in there and you can actually see exactly how big your system partition is. So you can go ahead and do that before you run this repartition script to satisfy yourself about how big it is before you run it, and then you can come back and then have another look at it once it's all done, and you'll see that it is indeed pumped up to just under 1500 megabytes, which is still not particularly big, and you're going to want to use the smallest GApps package you can get your hands on. Alright, so we've done that. We're moving on to step 4. Step 4, we're going to download and install an old Flow or Deb custom ROM via TWRP. So this is probably a bit of a contentious step, but I'm kind of standing by it just because of some issues and complications I had in the past, which make me feel that it's very useful to have an older ROM that is compatible with your TWRP that you haven't currently installed. I guess I'll try to explain that a little bit more when we're actually installing Android 11 proper. But anyway, you're going to, and I'll provide a link to an older version that I did manage to find. And you want to hang on to them is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, you pull it down, and we're going to copy it again to our device using MTP USB file transfer, and we just want the ROM. We're not going to install any GApps because we're not actually using this for anything other than to just have a base install set up before we go any further. So we're going to do that. We're going to install it. We're going to do a single reboot. And then we're just going to come back into TWRP recovery. Right, what we want to do now is we want to just download a few things just to get ourselves ready. So we actually want to download the latest LineageOS recovery, because that is what we will be using to install crDroid 11. We need to, because crDroid 11 is signed flocks, which means it is specifically designed for the repartitioned version of Nexus 7, and it just so happens that the Lineage recovery is designed to handle flocks signed ROMs, so that's handy. So we're going to download that, and then once we've downloaded that, we're going to download obviously crDroid Android 11 from the official website, and then we're going to grab the smallest GApps package we can get our hands on. I'm going to recommend either the Open GApps Pico package or the Mind Your Gaps package. Either of those two are just great. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy crDroid and our gapps package to internal storage, again through twrp, and we're going to take this LineageOS and we're going to stick it into our fastboot directory. Again, if you don't know about fastboot and all that good stuff, you're going to want to do a little bit of research so you are comfortable setting that up. And so that's just our command line interface on the PC. Alright, so once we've got all that going, we are really getting on to the business end of things. We're now just going to reboot our device into fastboot mode. So that's just volume down, power, and then once you're in there, you're going to connect up to USB and you're going to issue the fastboot command, which will be fastboot boot LineageOS recovery.image, just whatever that image name is, you're going to specify there. And what this will do is it will simply copy this into your device's memory and then auto reboot your device to run it. It won't actually install it because we're not flashing anything, we're just telling it to run this program, so it's a temporary install. Okay, so once it's running, we're now going to navigate to the install from internal storage option, and then we will just go ahead and select our crDroid Android 11 zip file. We will select to install it, and we will be asked whether we really want to install it because it's not signed. You will go ahead and select yes, and it will happily flash the image. Once it's flashed the image, we are actually going to reboot straight back into TWRP recovery. And again, you can navigate into the advanced menu and then select reboot to recovery from within LineageOS recovery. And it will do that, and you'll find yourself back in TWRP. When we're in TWRP, we're going to install our gapps package, or flash that, which will also get flashed to the system partition. And then once we've done that, we're going to select advanced wipe, and we're just going to zap cache, Dalvik, and data. So when we've cleared those out, we're now ready. We can reboot into system, and we reboot into system, and it will take a fair whack of time on its first reboot, but it will get there, and then you will be in crDroid 11 paradise, so you can get yourself all set up and customized. So that is pretty much it in terms of everything you need to do. So now what I'm going to do is move on to the third part of this little video presentation, and we're going to have a little chin wag about how I got here and how I did all of this. So when I first did this, I was running this older version of crDroid 7, and even then I noticed that I just hadn't had enough room to install a gapps package. So what I actually did is I just installed crDroid, and I didn't install any gapps package at all. And then from there I actually just went ahead and installed FDroid, and from there I then downloaded Aurora Store, and had a pretty functional system doing that without even really having any of the Google framework and Play services installed. Still, it wasn't the best, and there were some pretty important features to me that were missing. Because of my visual impairment, I had used the accessibility suite, and I do actually make use of like select to speak and sort of some of the OK Google features. They are genuinely useful. If I'll say one thing about Google, is that they do cover off accessibility very well. I'll give them that. And besides, I was really keen on getting a later version of Windows, primarily 10 or greater. Oh, not Windows, Android, 10 or greater, because of the dark mode support. Again, having system-wide dark mode support. I just cannot overstate how useful it is. And along those lines, I just want to get something else off my chest. This is an opportunity for me to just kind of get it out there. It amazes me how many video tutorials, the very first thing they will tell you is that you need to have a rooted device before you can install this custom ROM. That is an absolute nonsense, and I do not know why these people who provide otherwise quite competent guides actually say that. It just doesn't make sense. You root a device in order to give your operating system the applications in your operating system super user godlike access when and if they need it. That is something quite different than wanting to install a custom ROM. Custom ROMs, I think most of them avoid auto-rooting your device for the very reason that they want the user to be able to choose whether they want to root the device or not. So no, you do not need to root your device to install a custom ROM. Rooting your device is a choice you make after you've installed a custom ROM, or even on your stock ROM, depending on your needs. And the reason I bring that up is actually I have a good reason to root my device, and that is there is a app called Darq, D-A-R-Q, which actually forces dark mode, and it does it very unambiguously and better than pretty much anything else I've seen around that does it. It will basically push everything into dark mode just about, including apps that don't seem to have any support for it at all. So anyway, that aside, I wanted a later version, and so naturally enough that pointed me towards Lineage Flocks. So I went ahead and I did honestly give it my best shot to follow this comprehensive guide, but all did not go well. Now partly that may be because I'd already run a previous repartition script, and at the time I was under the mistaken idea that it was a different repartition script than the one they have here, and that this one would have yielded a larger partition. It doesn't. It yields exactly the same, for about 1500 megs. So like I said, follow my instructions of just doing it through twrp. But I wonder whether that was possibly what caused me some problems. I'm struggling a little bit to remember whether I'd actually reversed it out. I definitely did at one point reverse it out, because another thing about this repartition script is that if you run it a second time, it will recognize it's already modified, and it will simply then back out what you've done. And that will happen because instead of typing in the word modify, it will actually tell you to type in the word stock. So you type in stock in the terminal screen, and then it will reverse all the changes. And I did that. But somewhere along the line, I got myself in a bit of trouble. And I think it was actually because I think what I'd actually done is I'd actually installed LineageOS, although I'd done it in a slightly different fashion than instructed in here. I did it by just temporarily loading LineageOS recovery, as I've explained, and installing it that way. To my horror, when I did that, I discovered that it had actually permanently installed the LineageOS recovery onto the device, because it actually does that as part of the ROM install, and you cannot back it out. Once it's in, you cannot flash TWRP back. So I figured out to do that I actually had to again root the device, then install TWRP app, and then from the TWRP app I was able to then from within that flash TWRP recovery back into the recovery partition. That was the only way I could do it, so I did manage to get it back that way. I really don't like people doing stuff or systems doing stuff without really giving you any choice, and unfortunately LineageOS kind of did that with regards to their own recovery. So anyway, I as I said, I had some problems, and primarily I had the problem when I was actually trying to rerun this repartition, which again I thought was a different version. and it seemed to do with a problem with the ADB sideload. It just wasn't connecting properly to my device, even though I was following the instructions absolutely to the T. And it certainly wasn't taking me to the point where I was needing to go and enter the word modify from LineageOS. So I kind of just, in the end, what I did was I took their version of the repartition script. I ran my old version first to back it out of my device to get it back to its original state. Then I ran their version via twrp and discovered it had come back with exactly the same amount of space. So they are the same, definitely the same. So with all of that, I did nevertheless, had installed Lineage, but I thought, well, I want to give crDroid a crack. So I used basically the same process. I just temporarily installed LineageOS recovery, flashed crDroid, went back into twrp, flashed my gapps package, and then did the necessary advanced wipe, rebooted in, and I was golden. Now I did have a bit of a problem, and that is why I've advised keeping hold of the old ROM. And what actually kind of happened was I was trying to see if I could get maybe a bigger gapps package installed, because I found I couldn't get OK Google working, and I thought maybe that was because the gapps package I used was too small and didn't include the necessary modules. And so I got myself in some real trouble there, because what I did was I did a hard reformat, wiped out everything in preparation for just doing a fresh install. And when I went back into LineageOS recovery, I could no longer install from internal storage. That option had just disappeared. I could only install from ADB. And hey, you can do it that way, but it really unnerved me, and I thought, what have I done? Have I broken something? And I tried to recover from sort of some old backups I had, and I noticed one of them was complaining about not being able to open up the EFS, or not being able to interpret the EFS partition, which scared the living daylights out of me. Although looking back, I think that was because the backup I used was with the modified version of twrp. So I'm just really not too sure what was really wrong there. But what I assumed was wrong, and why I'm going to talk about this, is if we continue to scroll down here, one of the steps they have in here is the EFS persist backup, which I did indeed do. And like most people, I did it without really understanding what I was actually doing. I just copied the instructions. I do now understand exactly what this is doing, because I had to understand in order to actually be able to execute an effective restore. So I'm just going to talk us through that. So in these instructions, what they tell us to do is an ADB shell. And from the ADB shell, you can then actually issue native Linux commands to your Android device. And one of these native commands is the command dd, which is actually just a copy utility to create sort of bit-perfect copies. So what this is actually saying, this is not an if statement. What this is saying is in file equals, and then over here it says o file for out file equals. So what we're seeing is dd takes two arguments, an in file and an out file. So we can immediately understand that what we're saying is we want to take these in files, and this is the directory path and name of the file, and we want to create an out file to SD card / and we're calling it .img, and I guess we're using the .img by convention, but I imagine you could call it anything you want. So we're just running that and backing up 3 files within this dev / block directory structure. Once we've done that, we jump out of our shell, and then we just issue some ADB pull commands, which literally pull these image files that we just created down to our PC. Now it begs the question, why couldn't we just pull these original files rather than creating a copy of them first, and I guess it's because maybe the pull command actually moves the files rather than copies them. Indeed, if it does that, then we definitely do want to do this step first, so I'm going to assume that's what happens. So to reverse this, because again I was worried that I'd lost my EFS, to reverse this you basically need to do these steps in reverse and reverse the palms as well. So you start by issuing these ADB commands, but you do a push and you just push these files to your SD card on your device. Then you go into ADB shell and you issue these copy commands and you just flip the out file and make it the in file, and the in file becomes the out file. And once you do that, then you've actually restored your backup. Simple as. Now I'm not sure that that was the problem in hindsight, but at the time I thought it might have been, so I kind of went through that learning curve and actually did do that restore. So in case it's useful to you, yeah, that's what that's all about. So yeah, with all those caveats in mind, again I'll just say, if you're keeping twrp as I am, limit your backups to the boot and data partitions. Do not back up this or restore the system partition, and you'll be absolutely fine. When you think about it, the system partition really doesn't need a backup because it is read-only once you've flashed it. So once you've flashed your ROM zip file and your GApps package, that system partition is never changing. It's static. So you can actually recover it just by reflashing the original ROM and GApps package, and you've effectively, that is your backup anyway. So I think that's pretty much it, team. Any questions, feel free to ask. As I said, I'll endeavour to put as many links in the description as I can think of, and hopefully I haven't forgotten anything with this guide that I've produced. Alright, peace out.